We looking good? We got our coach? Outstanding. Kevin O'Connell, indeed. Probably you feel like you've already been run through the meat grinder this afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Dan, I appreciate you having me on, but that's what today's for.
That is true.
Day one at the building, day one getting to work, getting a chance to talk with you. It's all good things for me.
Couple of asides early. As a former sideline reporter, did you ever get a coach to snap at one of your probing questions?
I don't think I got a coach to snap, but I definitely got a few eye rolls, and I have a lot of respect for anybody, especially those sideline reporters that have to get the the walk-off interview. I've watched it too many times. The emotions are high.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, it could be good or bad. You're set up to fail, and that's the toughest thing as a coach, to watch somebody have to do a job where they're set up to fail. It's the ultimate. That's the opposite of what we do as coaches, right? So we should have some. We should have some grace for those brave individuals who go through that process, and I will sure try to do that. I can't make any promises, but I will sure try to do that.
I think it's a really hard job, those walk-offs, like you say, because there's no perfect question, because you never know what the mood of the coach is going to be. Fortunately, you'll be at the other end of that, and maybe your own experience will mean you'll be a little bit more sympathetic to those who have to do that particular job. One personal note that I don't think came up in the presser today that fascinated me: your dad's career track. You introduced him among your family members that were there. And as I understand it, he was a football guy. He was a football player until a pretty serious injury and a follow-up to that basically convinced him and perhaps the school he was playing for, hey, we can't mess around anymore with this thing. And he ends up becoming an FBI agent, I think, for a couple of decades, which sounds more dangerous to me. What was it like to be the son of an FBI agent?
Well, first and foremost, that's some good intel right there, going all the way back to him. He actually did break his neck playing at the University of Villanova. He was on the defensive side, so a couple things came from that. I realized real quick I wanted to play offense. and secondly, if he was still, even after going through all that, going to let me play football, I knew he had to love the game, and it would be a game that I would sure fall in love with myself. But, definitely him as an FBI agent. Watched him, really, really commit to caring about his craft and taking a lot of pride in going to work every day. There was a lot of nights and a lot of times where he was, out working and away from us, where, very similar to coaches in a lot of ways. Obviously, their work being much, much more important than ours, but very similar as far as the sacrifice that our family made, knowing he was going to be committed to being the best that he could be. Being an FBI agent. And I think as a coach, that set the table for, understanding the sacrifice and the amount that my family would be a part of my decision to get into this profession, and then not only get into it, but try to do it the right way and feel like you're responsible for a lot of which these players go out and do, and really going out and giving them the best possible chance to have success in what they do. It takes a lot of work. You got to study it. You got to know who you're playing, how you want to attack them, and that's not something that you can do in a couple hours on a Monday or Tuesday. You got to fully be all into what you do. You got to love it, and the players will feel that. But my dad has had a huge influence on me. He's an unbelievable leader. Taught me a lot about how to deal with people the right way and treat people with respect, especially when you're trying to coach them and lead them. They got to respect you, but you gain their respect by earning it. By treating people the right way in every interaction you have with them.
Were you ever tempted to follow in his footsteps?
I was. I absolutely was. And I've had former college teammates that, whether they've actually seen it through all the way or not, that have really consulted with him about the profession. I mean, guys that I played in the NFL with that have really looked at law enforcement as kind of a second career. Special man, and if anybody's out there that knows him and has ever met him, they would feel the same way, and I hope fans in Minnesota get to know him as well as I know him.
You had mentioned you got a lot of questions I expected during the press conference, which we carried live, at least for the first 30 minutes of it, most of it, about the issue of whether you wanted to will call plays, which you said yes. And I'm not surprised by that answer. I don't think very many people are. But I was talking to the old Vikings quarterback, Sean Salisbury, who's doing a lot of radio work these days, and he brought up a point that we've talked about in the air, the question of whether there was any hesitation, not because of your lack of confidence, but the question of when you're new to a head coaching job, whether there's any thought of, look, I want to run the team and I want to manage the game on game day as well. And so I might actually be better served taking that approach, even if most people in your position do exactly what you're suggesting. What was your thought process on that?
It's a great question because it is something that you're on your mind. As a first-time head coach, I have called plays before in different circumstances, but it's one thing where if you're truly going to be a play caller, you've got to put so much time and energy into it, not only in coming up with the plan with your staff, but then trying to figure out what you actually want to call in the game and how you want to sequence it and how you want to know when you want to call certain things throughout the game. And all of that is part of kind of that situational football. But when there's two other phases to the game that you're responsible for as the head coach, being defense and special teams, two things have to happen. You got to rely on your staff. You got to rely on the coaches that you hire. But then you also have to be willing to rely on the offensive coaches to do their jobs at a really high level during the game, because there's not going to be a ton of time in between series where you could be dedicated to the entire offense and the entire group. You might get a little bit of time with the quarterback. You might get a little bit of time with the group in general if they got to hear a message from you about where and how you're going to go about doing things the next drive. But in the end, you got to be dialed into what's happening on the field for that particular snap, be out in front of what may come up in the game situationally. Where are you in the game? End of half, end of game. All those things come into it. The way that the replay system works nowadays with the challenges, more oftentimes than not, it's going to be put on the head coach if it's close to have to throw that flag, and you got to rely on some people there, but at the same time have some conviction about your decision. So when you do it, you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're making a smart decision in that moment, and never treating any other moment than the next one, and treating each situation as its own, and making a cool, calm, level-headed decision based upon where we're at in the game.
Kevin O'Connell is with us on the Fan. Vikings' new head coach. This, of course, day one, officially, I guess you could say, introduced to the state of Minnesota at a presser that began at 4, which we carried right here on the Fan. You talked a lot about, were asked a lot of questions, not surprising, about Cousins, and you mentioned a belief that he is an elite thrower, accuracy being a big part of what he's very good at. He obviously has the arm to make all the throws. We also refer to something called the ability to process at the line of scrimmage and to play fast, which I thought was interesting because to me that's as big a part of it as the accuracy part.
Yep.
So where is Cousins in that regard? Because the one concern I've tended to have with him, for whatever it's worth, is whether he can make what I would say the play when there really doesn't seem to be a play there to be made. There are quarterbacks who do that. I would suggest Stafford did that a few times for you guys in your run this year. Does he have that in him?
You know what? I think he does. I think all quarterbacks, we call them off-schedule plays. The plays that when they're drawn up in the playbook, you don't necessarily see that as a touchdown being the way it eventually happens. And I think Kirk is one of those guys that has enough athleticism, which is the kind of the baseline requirement to create plays off schedule by avoiding the rush, buying some extra time. I think there's no greater example out there than the Tom Brady's of the world that you would never say, hey, I want that guy on my team for any kind of 40-yard dash contest. But then you watch him play the position and the ability to navigate an NFL pocket, the ability to buy that little extra time just by the savviness of understanding the protection and understanding where my weaknesses may be. Hey, did they bring a pressure? They did not. Is there an extra defender in coverage? Is it a 3-man rush where I know I can buy a little bit more time just by hitching in place and staying grounded as a quarterback? There's off-schedule plays out of the pocket. There's off-schedule plays in the pocket. Matthew Stafford is, one of those guys that when I think of those off-schedule plays, they don't necessarily always come out of the pocket. Buying a little bit of extra time, navigating within that pocket, understanding that you're truly not under duress, but in an NFL pocket, you got to be able to operate, with people around you and arms and legs flying around you as the pocket tries to hold up, and you got to be willing to keep your eyes downfield. stare down that barrel and find throws and find ways to make it right. I call it the make it right factor of playing the position. Can you finish every down playing with a smart, aggressive mindset that gives your playmakers a chance to win in rhythm and potentially find 3 or 4 snaps here and there in a game where you can potentially create those explosives on those off schedules? You're exactly right to know that it's an important part of playing the position, and it's my job coaching and our job as a staff coaching to try to help create those plays come at the proper times in the confines of calling really, really good plays that have good answers versus all coverages and pressures, good man answers, good zone answers. Not to get too technical, but we as coaches have a lot to do with those plays needing to be a necessity versus a luxury, because those two things are different, and you probably know what I'm talking about when you watch certain NFL offenses that rely on those plays versus some NFL offenses where those plays are just bonus on top of the other efficient plays that you're running.
Here's where it gets interesting to me. I look at Stafford this season. You went and got him. It clearly felt you had to add that factor, and it worked. You got it done. I mean, he's got some great people around him. You know that better than I do, obviously, but he made enough plays, important plays, and comebacks to lead you. He had, I think, 17 interceptions during the season, which would indicate, and I'm sure you guys never want to encourage a pick six. It's not something you endorse as an offensive mind, but it speaks to the issue of risk. That do coaches have to convey certain messages that, all right, I don't want you to make as many bad plays as possible, but I am prepared to live with some bad plays in order to get some of those off-schedule plays, some of those explosive plays, that's sort of the trade-off. Because I think with Kirk sometimes, the previous regime, he felt like, man, we do not turn the ball over and we lose our minds when we do, and that enters into whatever the climate is that a coach is attempting to set. How important is that from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's important that our whole entire team understands that part of our football philosophy is playing in a smart, aggressive way. And on our terms. You guys probably heard me use that phrase in the press conference. We're going to pick our spots, and we're going to have a philosophy on offense where we're going to be aggressive with how we attack an opponent. We're going to use the different tools and weapons that we have, from tempo to cadence to formations to personnel groupings, to try to tip the scales in our favor, and then put our guys in situations where they can run premier plays versus the looks that we want to run. And then when in doubt, those plays, those times where we don't accomplish that goal, we need our guys to, be smart with the football, and mainly the quarterback. We need our guys to play with great ball security when they've got the ball in their hands from a ball carrier standpoint. But you're exactly right from a standpoint of that risk reward, and that's part of what we look at as coaches when you call a play, when you gauge where we're at. How's the defense playing? What's our field position like? What's the time of possession been like? Are we in control of this game right now? And then lastly, I look back at Matthew's, turnovers from this year, and it's crazy. I can't probably talk about every touchdown that he had, but I could probably cite every single one of those interceptions, because that's just how we are as coaches. And the one thing that came up time and time again is don't make a bad play worse. The times where I've let you down as a coach, or the play in particular, the defense won that down. How can we get through that down with possession? Try to limit any negative outcomes that could come from the situation on that play that we're in. And that term, don't make a bad play worse. Let's finish this play out the best possible scenario that we can, and that's playing quarterback in the NFL. And that's whether you throw a touchdown, that's whether you take a sack, that's whether you make a decision to try to tuck it and run it and go steal a first down on a critical third down. All those decisions are what separate the quarterbacks in this NFL league that we play in from winning and losing on a weekly basis. And as coaches, we do everything we can to help them, put them in the best possible situations that we can, but when in doubt, rely on a guy's experience, his ability to throw the football, his ability to see the field, and make sure you're turning that guy loose to go play the position, to go play winning football. The
good thing about an opening press conference is it gives you a chance to give people a sense of who you are and to say what you think is important to say. The bad part is there's a tendency, because it's all we have to work with, to overreact and to hang on every sentence. I'll give you a good example. You were asked about, is Kirk Cousins going to be your quarterback next year? And the words you used were, he's under contract, I'm excited to coach him, I'm anticipating him being here. And immediately, because it's my nature, my alarm bells go up and say, interesting wording. I'm anticipating him being here. Almost seems like a little bit of, you're giving yourself a little bit of wiggle room there about the possibility that he's not going to be here. Is that me reading too much into it, or is that you keeping all your options open?
Well, I appreciate that question, absolutely, and anticipated getting questions about Kirk today. I can tell you my answer today is one filled with full confidence in Kirk Cousins and knowing that I'm going to get the opportunity to coach him. It's filled with a lot of enthusiasm of the players that are going to be in the huddle around Kirk and the type of offense we could build for our entire group here in Minnesota. But it's also filled with the fact that it's early on in the process here for me, day one here on the ground, working with a lot of really, really great people. And I just want to make sure that everybody out there knows we're going to do everything in our power always to do whatever gives us the best chance to win. And that goes for each and every position. But I feel very, very strongly about my relationship with Kirk, where he's at as far as being a quarterback in this league and potentially his fit in what we want to do offensively.
Is that a yes? Or is that still a maybe?
It is. It's a yes. It's absolutely a yes, because I've got a lot of confidence and faith in Kirk Cousins and our ability as a coaching staff to have him playing the best football of his career.
The trend in this business is younger in terms of head coaches. It's also about communication. We have interesting debates about this on the radio all the time, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, or it's just the reality, and so the best coaches need to adjust to it. But what you didn't talk about today, and what I never hear, is whether you have the ability or are going to have the ability to challenge, because I assume there still has to be a component where you hold players accountable and you challenge them when necessary, even if it occasionally hurts their feelings. What's your view on that part of being a head coach?
Well, I think you can challenge players in a lot of ways. Hopefully you've done your job teaching the team how we're going to play, the type of effort, finish, and sustain energy that it takes to play this game at a high level, how we're going to impose the different aspects of offense and defense and special teams, the tools at which we coach and we have to apply pressure to the other side. And a lot of that is just purely understanding what we want to do from a schematic standpoint, but then how we want to go about doing it. And maybe the most important thing is the why. Give these players the why behind what we're coaching. And then more oftentimes than not, my experience leads me back to the point of, if they are talented enough to do what you're asking them to do, they understand the why and they understand how to do it, those guys are going to go out there and do everything that they can. If they've got the right makeup and they love playing this game, to go do everything they can to have success each and every time they go play, because they're competitors, they love playing, and that's our job as coaches, to kind of harvest those feelings and then give them the backup that they need from a standpoint of schematics, technique, fundamentals, and true coaching, where they know we care about them, they know we're doing everything we can to help them, and we're the first guys there to tell them they're doing a great job when they do. And when we've got to coach them hard, we've earned the right to do that because we have their respect and their trust.
Well, just a couple more to wrap things up with new Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell. We appreciate the extended time with you this evening. What if you had to boil it down to one thing, what's the most important thing you believe you learned from McVay?
I think it's just the environment that you walk into the building with every single day. And it's not always when you're winning. I mean, that's the misconception. The environment when you're winning can be easy. Everybody's got enthusiasm. Everybody's got juice. Everybody's seeing their highlights on SportsCenter, them going to make the winning plays. It's those days where you walk in where adversity's hit. You lose 3 games in the month of November, and you go a good amount of time in an NFL season without winning a football game. For a lot of buildings, that can be that could be catastrophic, and it's impossible for some people to overcome that. But that was when we were at our best this year, is we all knew that it was just about sticking to our process. It was about going back to work, coaches first and foremost, and providing the path for our players to just continue to stay the course and improve those slightest little bits, those slightest little improvements, to give ourselves a team chance to go have a winning edge, to go play and beat some really good teams through the month of December on into January, and then finishing up winning a Super Bowl. It was an invaluable lesson for me to go through that, to trust it, to stay the course from a standpoint of being part of the leadership of our coaching staff, but then watching our players take the ownership of it, where they were right there with us, and we were side by side in the trenches trying to make sure every single day we were giving ourselves a chance to go win that game on Sunday. And then when we were able to go out and do it, we repeated that same process, trusted in each other. The foundation and the core beliefs of that culture were set long in motion long ago. And when you can rely on that and you can trust that thing, I can't tell you how powerful that can feel for a team to go back to work on a Monday and start knocking down those goals 1 week at a time until you finish up doing it in the biggest game that we have, which I just did, believe it or not, 3 or 4 days ago. It was not that long ago.
It probably feels like a lifetime ago, but it wasn't that long ago. You're exactly right. How you guys wired? Are you and McVay wired differently? What would you say? How does your personality, you think, compare to his?
I think we're very similar in a lot of ways with how we treat people. We treat the people around us. We feel very strongly about the relationship sides of what we do within the NFL building, and really without outside of the building for that matter. I think the one way we are different, I would say, is I'm probably a little bit calmer. Sometimes he would probably agree with that when it comes to some of the situations that you see. I've seen some of the videos of him, but more importantly, I've heard him on the headsets throughout some of those times where, I've joked with him before. Sometimes the worst time to be on the headset with him is when we're in that 4-minute offense mode, playing with a lead late in the game, and we're just trying to run out the clock. That's when you got to make sure you've got that. We don't really have that mute button like you guys do in the radio business. But if you had one of those on the coach to quarterback or the coach to coach system in the NFL, I think some of us would have used it every now and then. But absolutely love coaching for him. Love him as a man, a person. He's one of my true mentors in this business. And I'll forever be grateful for the opportunity he gave me in Los Angeles and what I've been able to learn from him that I'll absolutely bring with me right here to Minnesota.
Incidentally, did you endorse the fourth down? I call it an end around. You probably have a fancier call for it. To cup to keep the drive alive. Did you endorse that call?
I did. It was giving our best player the ball when we had to have it. And even if we had to hand him we call it a jet sweep. But if you want to call it an end around, that tells me that you're a little bit more of an old school guy. That's okay. But just know we'll call some end arounds, we'll call some reverses, but that one right there, right from the quarterback, at the line of scrimmage, we'll call that one a jet sweep. You'll see more of those here over the next few months around here.
That, to me, was the beauty of that drive. It was very clear by then. Everybody in the building, presumably including the defense, knows that you got to get the ball to Kupp, that you don't have as many alternatives. You're not running well. You've lost, another really good receiver. And that, to me, was the most impressive part. Doesn't matter. We're going to have our quarterback, who we went and got, go out and get the ball to our, at this point, most influential and best skill player.
That was the conversations that took place before that drive. But it wasn't lost on me on giving some of those other guys some opportunities to make plays as well.
Sure.
We utilized the running back versus some matchups. We did everything we could in that game when we had to have it, and some guys that were not asked to step up very much throughout the year were able to make some plays. People will forget about some of those Darrell Henderson catches on third down throughout the game. They'll forget about Bryson Hopkins at the tight end position making some critical catches in a game where he really wasn't asked to have a big impact on our pass game this year. And then obviously the offensive line for holding up the way they did, for us having to essentially drop back pass 14 out of 16 plays or whatever it was on that drive, keeping Matthew clean, keeping him upright, and then his ability to go and go make plays. And when we absolutely had to have him with Cooper and the rest of our guys, I'll never forget that drive, and those guys went and won us a Super Bowl.
Last item for you. I'm assuming you were aware that in this interim period, before the announcement was made, obviously nothing could be done until after the Super Bowl, that there was a lot of fear and loathing here, that something was going to go wrong. There were the interesting comments from McVay about kind of cryptic comments that almost seemed to indicate, well, maybe he's ready to take the $10 million a year job in TV right now. And then what? What if O'Connell says, I'll just stay here and be the next Rams coach? People here, Vikings fans get insecure because, they haven't won the big one. There have been a lot of things that when they can go wrong, have gone wrong. Were you aware of that long distance, that all this stuff, a lot of speculation and a lot of projecting was going on, that somehow this was going to end up going the wrong direction and you were never going to come?
I was not aware that it got to that point. I just know that when I did hear Sean make that comment and some of our dialogue, we became very, very close this year, obviously through a really, really long season and a successful one. But I looked at him first thing in the morning on Monday after a significantly long night of enjoying our victory. And I said, would you just stop? You're gonna coach, and you're gonna coach this quarterback. And he loves what he's been able to do there. I know the guys love playing for him. It's a really special place that's been set up in a lot of ways. How I want to try to set things up here, and that's not saying anything other than the truth of the culture and the things we're going to try to build here. But no, it never got to that point with me, and I never even had heard that. I could not be more excited to be the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, and Vikings fans are a huge part of that. As I talked about today, U.S. Bank Stadium and everything that is to come into as a visiting coach. I'm just glad, at least for now, on that home sideline, Vikings fans will be excited to have me there.
I really appreciate the extended time. Welcome to town. I hope we'll get a chance to do this again down the road, because there's a lot of interesting decisions that have to be made, and a lot of stuff I know you guys are looking forward to. We enjoyed the discussion today. Thanks again for the help.
You got it. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.